Good day. I'm glad you tuned in to our program today. Actually, this is the very first one of a program I wanted to start up called Talking About Issues. And, I've discovered that we spend a lot of time looking at the headlines or hearing the news, but we really don't talk about what's behind some of the issues. And that's why I wanted to do some of these recordings and share with you, try to bring in experts on the issues of the day, the significant things that we hear about, but may not know the backstory or know how people are addressing some of the challenges we have in our communities and in the country. So today I wanted to focus on the number one issue. Over the last couple of years, I've seen a number of polls that suggest homelessness is the biggest issue in our state, if not our local communities. And what's behind that? And who's working to solve that? So that's why I wanted to introduce you to a representative of the Salvation Army, my friend Major Nesan Kistan, who oversees the Salvation Army here in Orange County, and they're doing phenomenal stuff as it applies to addressing homelessness in our community. So first off, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Curt, when you said good day, you really got my heart beating.
Right.
Because that's an Australian greeting to a friend, so I feel at home already.
I'll never do that again unless I have an Aussie come and share. So you know what? I don't know if people really know who the Salvation Army is. So why don't we start there?
So the Salvation Army was started by William and Catherine Booth in the East End of London in 1865, really as a Christian mission movement. So we are a Bible Christian-based mission movement serving the poor and marginalized.
Yeah. So you have local churches?
We do have local churches.
Right. So there's local churches all over the country and all over the world, right?
So we're in 134 countries across the world, and we have local churches, which we call CORES, because we're a
Say that again?
CORES, because we're a paramilitary organization. So we use a lot of military terminology.
Yes. So you're not reverend, you're major.
Correct.
Wow. That's something. So everybody sees the Salvation Army from the context of a Salvation Army thrift store or a red bucket at Christmas time, right? What are those? What's that outreach function of those?
So, the kettles that you see, the red kettles you see is basically...
Did I call it a bucket? Sorry.
Well, it's okay. I mean, listen, we call it so many different things. But the red kettle was iconic from Boston, where, the Salvation Army, a group of Salvation Army officers saw the poor and decided to create a kettle to raise money to feed those over the Christmas period of time that were hungry. And that tradition has just continued for generations. So we still have the red kettles, but it's one feature. And the thrift stores, well, they're one arm of what we do, but there's so much more.
Right. No, but people see you in from those perspectives, and that helps fund the overall mission, right?
Yeah, so the red kettles are iconic, but they feed people who are hungry and without during Christmas time. And our thrift stores, well, it's the major fundraising for adult drug and rehabilitation centers across the nation.
Wow. We'll get to that in a second. So where do you fit in? What do you do?
So my role as the Salvation Army head here for Orange County is I oversight all of our programs and social services and our churches across the county. We have 3 churches in Orange County, and we have a host of different social services, from trafficking homes for women that have been trafficked because of sexual abuse. And we also have our homeless shelters across the county that you've already alluded to.
Right.
We also have family services centers where we help people with utilities and rent and transitional houses. I mean, we have a myriad of programs.
So let's talk about the homeless shelters first. I mean, right outside my office here at Catalan State College, we're close by the Santa Ana River. And Anaheim faced a tremendous homelessness challenge, and just about anybody in Orange County saw it as they drove by the 55 or getting off to an Angel game. You saw all the encampments along the river. So, you stepped up at a really critical time in terms of the Salvation Army and building a homeless shelter in Anaheim. Describe that, and what is that all about?
Well, just on a personal note, before I share with you that, I remember seeing the encampments on the Santa Ana River Trail. I remember it wasn't even a week since we arrived in the country from Australia. And I was walking, and I saw it, and my wife and I said, "What on earth is that?" We pulled aside, walked down the riverbed for about 3 or 4 miles. I know it's a long walk, but it didn't seem that long after we talked to people along the riverbed. And we recognized that there was a crisis on our doorstep that we didn't even realize or seen anywhere else in the world like that. And so,
that, by the way, that's saying something, right?
Oh, it is.
As people who've lived around the world, to say in Orange County you hadn't seen something like that anywhere else in the world.
Well, the thing that truly captured me was the fact that I've been to refugee camps. I've been to Soweto, and I've seen the shanty tin houses all across Soweto in South Africa. To see that in a first world country in North America, it was just a startling image. I can still, as we're talking about it right now, my mind goes right back there.
Right.
So we realized we need to do something. So we gathered our team together, and we started thinking about what we could do to actually arrest the issue at hand.
Yeah. So that is, we don't need to get into the full details of the legal action and the restrictions on cities in terms of enforcing anti-camping laws and clearing people from areas like the Santa Ana River parks. But in fact, the bottom line is cities were directed in Orange County to build homeless shelters. And after they had those homeless shelters, in other words, an emergency shelter where people could go, right? Then you could enforce some of the other laws that the city had on the books. That was kind of a legal restriction. But you stepped up. You had a piece of property here on Lewis Street in Anaheim, and the Salvation Army stepped up and said, we're going to build a shelter for 200 people.
That's right. In fact, initially when we spoke to the city, it was only 50 people.
Yeah.
And then that number just continually ballooned to where it is today, 325-bed facility on Lewis Street on 7 acres of land.
Yeah. So what is the emergency shelter? What does it do?
So the emergency shelter is basically our first response. It's our triage center. It's where we actually take chronic homeless people right off the streets, off the parks, off in the shopping malls, wherever the outreach services or the Tustin PD, the Anaheim PD finds them, and they bring them to us, and we become that first point of call. And in that space, we treat these people with dignity again. We give them an opportunity to shower, to meet a case manager, to find a bed, and we begin to have a good nutritional meal and to have some safety and security again in their lives. So we begin the process of healing.
Yeah. Are they locked in? Describe, how that relationship is to that center and that individual who's on the street. They're brought there to get them off the street, to sleep and have food. But what is their responsibility?
They're not locked in. They're definitely not locked in. It's not a prison, but it certainly is where we ask those individuals to have some personal responsibility. The personal responsibility is that they've got to meet with a case manager as soon as they arrive within 30 days. And within that time frame, there is a series of steps that each resident needs to undertake. Because here's the reality. The Salvation Army is not in the business of just sheltering people or warehousing people. We're in the business of transforming lives. So we want people to move through our facility to find wholeness and hope again, not just to be stuck in one location.
Yeah. So I know that center, when Anaheim Mayor Harry Sadu came into office, and 4 years ago, that was one of his focal points, is to build multiple centers in Anaheim to address this, to get the people off the street and get them into a proper environment. So you stepped up and you were able to build the 200 some beds initially in 79 days, I think.
79 days, 200 beds were built in 79 days. And it was an amazing partnership with the city of Anaheim. We couldn't have done it without the city of Anaheim and the mayor, Sadu, and his team. So we had pretty well the entire public works team sitting with the Salvation Army in partnership. This was the best government-private partnership one could have had. And together we actually took all the barriers and pushed them aside to actually respond to the crisis in a record time of 79 days. We were operational 79 days, not just building the structure. We had a team of staff. We had people being transported there immediately the next day. So we build in 79 days, do the opening, the big ceremony, and then the next day, we've got a team of people there.
Wow. So where else in Orange County? Sorry, I just want to focus on Orange County right now because I know you're all over the place, including a large bit of work in LA County. But in Orange County, where else is the Salvation Army providing homeless shelter or emergency shelter uses?
So we have a 79 bed facility in Santa Ana. And we have several in Tustin Fields. We have 6 permanent or temporary transitional housing in Tustin Fields. And previously we had 14 apartments in Bowana Park that we also were using to house people.
You know, there's a lot of people listening that will say those words sound familiar, but they don't really know where those are. So I think that was Buena Park.
Yes.
Anyway,
sorry. Excuse my Australian accent.
Yeah, no problem at all. So, but in Anaheim, that was the original 200-bed shelter, and I know you've increased it by 100, 170 or so from there, which is an emergency shelter. And I also think that some folks think that that's the end of it. Get people off the street and they're taken care of. But in fact, you almost started the other way around, didn't you? I mean, the Anaheim Rehabilitation Center, it's in my head, is ARC. That was in Anaheim on Lewis Street for, 30-some years?
35 years ago, we built a 175-bed rehabilitation facility for both men and women facing major addictions.
And what do you do there?
Well, that's a 6-month program, and in that 6-month program, there are 3 tiers to where people find themselves in. They first come in. The first 30 days is simply stabilization.
Right.
We stabilize them. We help them find the new way of routine. Because for a lot of people, when you've been out on the streets, whether you've been homeless or whether you've been in full-blown addiction, you have no routine. You don't have a regular get-up time and go to bed time. You don't have any activities that need to occupy your day. So basically, we are trying to give them stabilization. And so once we stabilize the individual, the next period of the phase is the treatment phase, where they'll see cognitive behavioral therapists and see psychologists and have group therapy. And we start to unpack whatever their trauma is. And then once they move through that phase, it's then really getting them ready to transition out. And so we're hoping they'll learn some skills, whether it's working in the kitchen or whether they're working the warehouse, which eventually leads to a thrift store, where they learn how to sort clothing, they learn how to label things, they work with electronics. There's a whole range of activity. So it's a work therapy center as well, as part of their training and rehabilitation.
Yeah. See, that's what's amazing, that, you as an organization see the emergency shelters important, get people off the street, try to get some stability in their life, and do an assessment as to what needs they have. And then they have a place with on your campus to be able to take that next step into rehabilitation. So I would assume that with those 2 types of programs you have gotten a good understanding of who are the homeless in our community. So who are they?
Well, that's always a really important question that people ask. Well, let's just blow the myths, right? Yeah. Straight off the bat. The reality is that the majority of the homeless population fit 2 categories. Either they've been suffering from a real serious addiction issue, or they have a serious mental health issue. But let's not face it. Let's boil that down a little bit further. In the homeless shelter, I'll tell you one story because it'll help explain the truth. I've seen 3 generations in a homeless shelter. Son, father, and grandfather. Now, for me, that is an alarming fact. But what it also reminds us, these are people.
Yeah.
Mums and dads. These are children, 18 to 25 years of age. I still call them children. Young adults, maybe. These faces are people that have suffered trauma of all sorts of kinds.
Right.
And they don't know how to cope with their trauma. So addiction is one form of dealing with trauma and coping with the pain of what they're going through right now. So there are a variety of things. In fact, it's also interesting, in our shelter, there are lawyers, attorneys, well-educated people with a formal education. They're not all just uneducated drug addicts or mental health patients. These are people from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of challenges.
So, that's good insight in terms of who is within this population, and therefore you have to serve and treat them from whatever angle. So when people move from the emergency shelter, a place to get off the street, and into the rehabilitation center, there, as you've described to me, there's drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs as well as mental health support programs to try to get that person to focus on getting their life back together. And then I know the big announcement in Orange County is for you to take the next step on the same piece of property on Lewis Street, just south of Ball, to build a permanent supportive housing, permanent apartments. So can you share with us what that is?
15 months' time from last Monday, we will open 72 permanent supportive housing units for men and women, which will help them move to the next step in their journey to full reintegration into society. Now, the great thing about it is with the permanent supportive housing units, they'll still get case management, obviously less than they would when they first arrive in the triage center, which is the 325 emergency beds, and less than they were receiving in the drug and alcohol rehabilitation facility, 175 beds.
Right.
But this will be them getting ready to join society again as a functional member. And that is exciting. 15 months, I can't wait.
Yeah. It is something. I mean, and to visualize, go back to your prior visualization of seeing tents on the river and seeing people there in those tents from every walk of life and challenge in life to end up on that riverbed. I guess because I live around here and I drive by and see that same vision of where those tents used to be, I do remember one day driving by Orangewood and seeing a whole bunch of folks out there delivering clothes to the homeless. And they were throwing big bags of black trash bags full of clothes over the fence for those homeless people on the other side of the fence. For some reason, that was such a negative view. First off, people who want to do good thought that would be doing good. Yet a couple days later, it rained. The bags tore open. Clothes were left piled up, rotting on the side of the road, not serving anybody. And the people who may have thought they were doing something good turned out not necessarily helping or impacting the people on the other side of that fence. So I guess, not just from a Salvation Army point of view, but for this whole issue of homelessness, what can people do to not make themselves feel good, but to serve the people who are homeless and recovering from that situation? What are some of the tangible things that someone says, you know what, I want to get involved, I want to be involved, I want to have an impact? What can they do?
Well, there's a lot of things people can do. And, you rightfully point out that often what happens is people really feel bad about the situation and want to do things. Yeah. And they often opt to things where, in an intention to do good, they actually do more harm. One of the things I often say to people is when you see someone who's homeless on the side of the street and you want to throw them a few dollars, that may not be the best way to help them. Feeding an addiction or a situation that has caused a person to still remain on the streets isn't helping them. You may feel great. Hey, listen, I gave $50 or $20 or whatever that amount is. That's not the way to support someone, because that's only just temporary and generally not treated very well. We want to implore people, if you have a gift or you have a skill, a professional skill, you maybe can help someone write a resume. You can partner with our employment navigators and help them in terms of helping. And we got a mutual friend, Sandy and Anthony, who do a phenomenal way in which they allow their business to be a pathway, an employment pathway for some of our homeless clients that are moving to the next phase. There are things like that are pragmatic. But maybe you can say, well, you know what? I don't know what I can do, but maybe I'm a part of a church family and I want to do something. Well, you know what? You can come and lead a small group, a Bible study. You can come in and maybe help someone when they move into their first home and help them furbish it. And by bringing resources and support. You may want to say, you know what? I just want to be someone's friend and partner with the Salvation Army and do things in terms of helping them when it's Christmas time. And they know that they probably won't get a gift for Christmas from anyone, and partner with the Salvation Army and give them a gift. And give them, once again, some level of humanity and dignity again. I can go through a host of different ways, but you know what they could do? Is just call us. Yeah. We're happy to engage with them. They may want to volunteer. They may want to, there's many ways you can help us.
No, but that's really helpful. You point out our mutual friends, Sandy and Anthony, who have a manufacturing business not too many blocks from where your facility is. And they stepped up and said, hey, as people are transitioning out of this program, we'll give them a job here. I know a couple hotels here in Anaheim have done the same thing. Correct. Said, here is how we can integrate those people who are taking that next step to independence and being able to live a life that most of us are accustomed to say, hey, I want to offer them a job here in our hotel in the resort area. I mean, there are those types of opportunities, and I think that's good. So the continuum of helping someone off the street into some stability, into rehabilitation of their problems, and then some permanent stability in a home is what you are looking to do here in Anaheim, but really what's being done in a lot of places all around Southern California. And we need to celebrate that because every step is a challenging step, right? I mean, you were sharing with me, you were one of the most successful in that middle difficult stage of rehabilitation, and your success is measured by recidivism. And it's great to see how many high percentage leave the program and be successful, but it's a lower percentage than I think a lot of people would think.
Well, it's concerning because if 1 in 3 people are successful, then there's 2/3 of those who come through our facility and our process that actually, unfortunately, end up back on the streets or in sometimes a worse situation than they originally found themselves in. So it's a success rate of 1 in 3, but there's a next phase that probably distinguishes us from lots of others in the space. And that's the reintegration phase. Mm-hmm. And we, as a Salvation Army, where we've talked about, and at our groundbreaking a couple of weeks ago when we broke ground on the Center of Applied Research and Innovation, we spoke about the house of the third phase, which is the homeless throughput system, which is really an innovative and creative way of saying, you know what, yes, the housing first model is important. Yes, the rehabilitation is important. Yes, the permanent supportive housing is important, but there's got to be another step. And that step is really reintegration, but not reintegration just in a housing market in Orange County that for many people is just not affordable. Is reintegration maybe outside of Orange County, where we actually say, you know what, the Salvation Army is in all of Southern California. Maybe we integrate them in a part where they still have a supportive network, but where housing is far more affordable and employment pathways are well created and established for them to continue.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, thank you, Major, for all you and the Salvation Army are doing in our community, particularly as it applies to addressing the big issue of homelessness in Southern California. So I hope that provided a quick overview of, one, some of the homeless issues and challenges, but also some of the opportunities and successes we find here. So thank you for watching number 1 in my Talking Issues series, and hope you watch the second one and beyond in weeks ahead. Thank you.